everyone, and again we are reading Goosebumps, The Scarecrow Walks at Midnight, and we are on chapter 3. Oh, it's disgusting, I shrieked. Gross, I heard Mark groan. The corn was as a disgusting brown color, and it was moving on the cob, wriggling, squirming. Stanley raised the corn to his face to examine it, and I realized it was covered with worms, hundreds of wiggling brown worms. No! Stanley cried in horror. He let the ear of the corn drop to the ground at his feet. That's bad luck! The book says so! That's very bad luck! I stared down at the ear of corn. The worms were wriggling off the cob, onto the dirt. It's okay, Stanley, I told him. I only screamed because I was surprised. This happens sometimes. Sometimes worms get into the corn, Grandpa told me. No, it's bad, Stanley insisted in a trembling voice. His red ears were aflame. His big eyes revealed his fear. The book! It says so! What book? Mark demanded. He kicked the wormy ear of the corn away with the toe of his high top. My book, Stanley replied mysteriously. My superstition book. Uh-oh, I thought. Stanley shouldn't have a book about superstitions. He was already the most superstitious person in the world, even without a book. Have you been reading a book about superstitions? Mark asked him, watching the brown worms crawl over the soft dirt. Yes. Stanley nodded his head enthusiastically. It's a good book. It tells me everything, and it's all true, all of it. He pulled off his cap and scratched his stubby hair. I've got to check the book. I've got to see what it says about the corn, the bad corn. He was getting pretty worked up. It was making me feel a little scared. I've known Stanley my whole life. I think he's worked for Grandpa Kurt for more than 20 years. He's always been strange, but I had never seen him so upset about something so unimportant as corn. Show us the scarecrows, I said, trying to get his mind off of it. Yeah, let's see them, Mark joined in. Okay, the scarecrows, Stanley nodded. Then he turned, still thinking hard, and began leading the way through the tall rows of corn stalks. The stalks creaked and groaned as we passed by them. It was kind of an eerie sound. Suddenly, a shadow fell over me. One of the dark scarecrows rose up in front of us. It wore a tattered black coat stuffed with straw. Its arms stretched stiffly out as it stuck out of its sides. The scarecrow was tall, towering over my head, tall enough to stand over the high corn stalks. Its head was a faded burlap bag filled with straw. Evil black eyes and a menacing frown had been painted on thickly in black paint. A battered old-fashioned hat rested on its head. You made these? I asked Stanley. I could see several other scarecrows poking up from the corn. They all stood in the same stiff position. They all had the same menacing frown. He stared up at the scarecrow's face. I made them, he said in a low voice. The book showed me how. They're pretty scary looking, Mark said, standing close beside me. He grabbed the scarecrow's straw hand and shook it. What's up? Mark asked it. The scarecrow walks at midnight, Stanley said, repeating the phrase he had used at the train station. Mark was trying to slap the scarecrow a high five. What does that mean? I asked Stanley. The book told me how, Stanley replied, keeping his eyes on the dark painted face on the burlap bag. The book told me how to make them walk. Huh? You mean you make the scarecrows walk? I asked, very confused. Stanley's dark eyes locked on mine. Once again, he got that very sullen expression on his face. I know how to do it. The book has all the words. I stared up at him, totally confused. I didn't know what to say. I made them walk, Jody, Stanley continued in a voice just above a whisper. I made them walk last week, and now I'm the boss. Huh? The boss of the scarecrows? I stammered. Do you mean... I stopped. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw the scarecrow's arms move. The straw crinkled at the arm as it slid up. Then I felt a rough straw brush against my face as a dry scarecrow arm moved to my throat. Chapter 4. The prickly straw poking out of the sleeve of the black coat scraped against my neck. I let out a shrill scream. It's alive! I cried in panic, diving to the ground, scrambling away on all fours. I turned back to see Mark and Stanley calmly watching me. Hadn't they seen the Scarecrow try to choke me? And then Stanley's son, Sticks, stepped out from behind the Scarecrow, a gleeful grin on his face. "Sticks, you creep!" I cried angrily. I knew at once he had moved the Scarecrow's arm. "You city kids sure scare easy," Sticks said, his grin growing wider. He reached down to help me to my feet. "You really thought the Scarecrow moved, didn't you, Jody?" he said accusingly. "I can make the Scarecrows move," Stanley said, pulling the cap down lower on his forehead. "I can make them walk. I did it. It's all in the book." Sticks' smile faded. The light seemed to dim from the dark eyes. "Yeah, sure, Dad," he murmured. Sticks is 16. He is tall and lanky. He has long, skinny arms and legs. That's how he got the nickname, Sticks. He tries to look tough. He has long black hair down past his collar, which he seldom washes. He wears tight muscle shirts and dirty jeans ripped at the knees. He sneers a lot, and his dark eyes always seem to be laughing at you. He calls Mark and me the city kids. He always says it with a sneer, and he's always playing stupid jokes on us. I think he's kind of jealous of Mark and me. I don't think it's been easy for Sticks to grow up on a farm, living in the little guest house with his dad. I mean, Stanley is more like a kid than a father. "I saw you back there," Mark told Sticks. "Well, thanks for warning me," I snapped at Mark. I turned back angrily to Sticks. "I see you haven't changed at all." "Great to see you too, Jody," he replied sarcastically. "The city kids are back for another month with the Hicks." "Sticks, what's your problem?" I shot back. "Be nice," Stanley murmured. "The corn has ears, you know." We all stared at Stanley. He had just made a joke. It was hard to tell with him. Stanley's face remained serious. His big eyes stared out at me through the shade of his cap. "The corn has ears," he repeated. "There are spirits in the field." Sticks shook his head unhappily. "Dad, you spent too much time with that superstition book," he murmured. "The book is all true," Stanley replied. "It's all true." Sticks kicked at the dirt. He raised his eyes to me. His expression seemed very sad. "Things are different here," he murmured. "Huh? I didn't understand. What do you mean?" Sticks turned to his father. Stanley was staring back at him, his eyes narrowed. Sticks shrugged and didn't reply. He grabbed Mark's arm and squeezed him. "You're as flabby as ever," he told Mark. "Want to throw a football around this afternoon?" "It's kind of hot," Mark replied. He wiped the sweat off his forehead with the back of his hand. Sticks sneered at him. "Still a wimp, huh?" "No way," Mark protested. "I just said it was hot, that's all." "Hey, you've got something on your back," Sticks told Mark. "Turn around." Mark obediently turned around. Sticks quickly bent down, picked up the wormy corn cob, and stuffed it down the back of Mark's t-shirt. I had to laugh as I watched my brother run screaming all the way back to the farmhouse. Dinner was quiet. Grandma Miriam's fried chicken was as tasty as ever, and she was right about the corn. It was very sweet. Mark and I each ate 2 ears dripping with butter. I enjoyed the dinner, but it upset me that both of my grandparents seemed so changed. Grandpa Kurt used to talk non-stop. He always had dozens of funny stories about the farmers in the area, and he always had new jokes to tell. Tonight, he barely said a word. Grandma Miriam kept urging Mark and me to eat more, and she kept asking us how we liked everything, but she too seemed quieter. They both seemed too tense, uncomfortable. They both kept glancing down at the table at Stanley, who was eating with both hands, butter dripping down his chin. Sticks sat glumly across from his father. He seemed even more unfriendly than usual. Stanley was the only cheerful person at the table. He chewed his chicken enthusiastically and asked for a third helping of mashed potatoes. "Is everything okay, Stanley?" Grandma Miriam kept asking, biting her bottom lip. "Everything okay?" Stanley burped and smiled. "Not bad," was his reply. Why do things seem so different? I wondered. Is it just because Grandma and Grandpa are getting old? After dinner, we sat around the big, comfortable living room. Grandpa Kurt rocked gently back and forth in the antique wooden rocking chair by the fireplace. It was too hot to build a fire, but as he rocked, he stared into the dark fireplace. a thoughtful expression on his white stubbled face. Grandma Miriam sat in her favorite chair, a big green overstuffed armchair across from Grandpa Kurt. She had an unopened gardening magazine in her lap. Six, who had barely said 2 words in the whole evening, disappeared. Stanley leaned against the wall, poking his teeth with a toothpick. Mark sank down into the long green couch. I sat down at the other end of it and stared across the room. Yuck! That stuffed bear still gives me the creeps, I exclaimed. At the far end of the room, an enormous stuffed brown bear, about 8 feet tall, stood straight up on his hind legs. Grandpa Kurt had shot it many years ago on a hunting trip. The bear's huge paws were extended, as if ready to pounce. That was a killer bear, Grandpa Kurt remembered, rocking slowly, his eyes on the angry-looking beast. He mauled 2 hunters before I shot him. I saved their lives. I shuddered and turned away from the bear. I really hated it. I don't know why Grandma Miriam let Grandpa Kurt keep it in the living room. How about a scary story? I asked Grandpa Kurt. He stared back at me, his blue eyes suddenly lifeless and dull. Yeah? We've been looking forward to your stories, Mark chimed in. Tell us the one about the headless boy in the closet. No, tell a new one, I insisted eagerly. Grandpa Kurt rubbed his chin slowly. His eyes went to Stanley's across the room. Then he cleared his throat nervously. I'm kind of tired, kids, he said softly. Think I'll just go to bed. But no story? I protested. He stared back at me with his jewel eyes. I don't really know any stories, he murmured. He slowly climbed to his feet and headed toward his room. What is going on here? I asked myself. What is wrong?